If you're interested in foraging for elderberries, the best time to actually spot the bushes is when they're in bloom, which is going to be about a month and a half to 2 months before the bushes actually have berries that are ripe and ready to harvest. So the reason this is true is that when they're in bloom, as you can see here, you have this just profusion of nice big white flower clusters that are very easy to spot. When the berries are ripe, it's also a good time to forage and find them, but you'll have an easier time of spotting the bushes when they're in bloom, when they have these kind of big white flags hanging out saying, here I am, I'm an elderberry. So what a lot of people do actually is to go out during the bloom period and spot their flowers, spot their bushes, and then take note. Either take a paper note, write it down, or some are actually using something like Google Maps and dropping a pin in the location that they can then go back to when they expect the berries to be ripe. So again, that's going to be about 6 to 8 weeks after the flowers in bloom. You can have some variation there depending on, the bush itself. Some will be a little earlier, some a little later. But generally, if you start keeping an eye out around 5 to 6 weeks after you see the flowers, and then just keep checking back every week, because once those berries are out and they're ripe, then the birds are apt to be flocking to them. That's actually another good sign that the berries are ripe and ready to harvest, is when you see the birds going to them. But you should try and get out there as quickly as possible when you do see that. But from afar, those white flower clusters are much easier to see than the dark purple berry clusters, which will be obvious if you're up close to the plant. But if you're kind of scouting, say on a hike, from the roadside across the field, this is going to be a lot easier to see. Now, it can fool you a little bit because there are other bushes that have a similar structure and a similar flower color and clusters. If you're in an area where multiflora rose grows, they're one of them that can fool you from afar. But when you get up close to the bush, you're going to see an obvious difference, namely no thorns, much smaller flowers. They should be in a pretty flat kind of umbrella cluster and very tiny, tons of them. Each one of those is a potential berry. And then as those ripen, some plants will stay upright like that. A lot of times they'll bend over with the weight, which is another good way to know that they're ripe and juicy and getting ready to harvest. So that's the word on that. If you're looking for some solid forageability, it's a great idea to get out there during the bloom season for where you live. Now, in different zones will be different. The higher zones down towards Florida, they may be as early as even March. Most of your locations are going to be a May through June bloom period, and that's kind of incremental up through the different zones and locations and climates. And some will go even into July. You also might find that some of the bushes themselves, even though this is in bloom in mid-June, it may actually continue and have some clusters in July and even later than that. Some bushes are more determinate than others, similar to a determinate versus indeterminate tomato. So you may still see some flowers, which can help you locate and could actually give you some harvest of the flowers. So that's another thing to consider when you're out foraging. It's okay to go ahead and take some of the flowers if you want to have elder flowers as a whole other kind of foraged product. They're excellent to dry for teas, to infuse all sorts of either tinctures or even vinegars, or even making like a wine or a mead with the elderflowers in them. They're really lovely for that. Now you might say, well, if I pick the flowers, I'm not going to get berries, which is sort of true, but it's really only an issue if you're going too heavy on the picking on the flowers. So you can forage up to 25% of the flowers off of a bush, And you actually might be doing yourself some favors, because what happens is that gives that bush more energy and more resources to put into the berries. So something between a 10, 15, and 25% harvest of the blossoms can actually yield you a better overall harvest yield, because the berries themselves will be plumper, juicier, and the plants will have an easier time of holding on to them. So hope this helps you, and I hope it encourages you to get out there and find some elderberries of your own.